This is CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. This is Decision 2012 on City Talk. The Latino vote. What is it? Who is it? Where is it? What impact might it have on the 2012 national elections and beyond? Here to talk Latinos 2012 is Angelo Falcón, a political scientist, founder and president of the National Institute of Latino Policy, and for more than 30 years, Angelo has been advocating to improve Hispanics' political clout. He is a member of the newly created Census Bureau National Advisory Committee on Racial, Ethnic, and Other Populations. He's a prolific author and editor of 4 books, scores of chapters, reports, papers, as well as newspaper columns and other commentary. Angelo is a frequent media commentator on all things Latino, and he is now the co-editor of the forthcoming reader, Latinos in New York, Communities in Transition. Angelo is a longtime resident of the Los Osos neighborhood of the Williamsburg section of Brooklyn. Welcome, Angelo.
Nice to be here.
One of my absolute favorites. Before we get into Latinos in the 2012 question, I have to ask you the same question I asked you right here 6 months ago. When you woke up this morning, what is it about the American political system that's really got you ticked off, that's got you upset?
Well, I think like I told you 6 months ago, it hasn't really changed. Basically, the lack of any real serious debate about issues affecting the American people. The fact that you have a lot of gotcha kind of approaches to politics. You have a kind of polarized kind of discussion that really doesn't allow for a serious, detailed discussion of the kinds of changes we need to see in terms of policies, in terms of politics. So it's hard to get a handle on these issues. From a Latino perspective, for example, it's hard to get beyond the platitudes of the candidates, both candidates, by the way.
And the campaign really hasn't helped articulate?
And there are all sorts of issues that on the surface may appear to be responsive to groups like Latinos. For example, when you talk about a jobs bill that, for example, the president is pushing, one of the things that we've come to see in the Latino community is that a lot of these kind of universal kinds of approaches to policies don't reach our community. So that, yeah, there may be some laudable goals in terms of, look, we're going to reduce the unemployment rate, we're going to create new jobs, but time after time, the complaint in the Latino community is that none of these programs reach the community, so that that's why there's always this search for kind of more specificity in terms of, well, how are you going to target this stuff to communities that need it the most? And that's been lacking, I think, in the current discussions of all sorts of issues in all areas.
Okay, I began the show with asking a lot of it questions. Is there an it? Is there a Latino vote?
Well, every survey that's been done shows that Latinos, over 2/3 of Latinos are going to be voting for Obama.
Right. The new Pew survey shows 69 to 21%.
And I think that by itself says, look, there's something here that you can legitimately call it a Latino vote. So that I think that's a good starting point. There are a lot of issues that kind of affect these different groups from 21 different countries that kind of come together around issues having to do with language, issues having to do with a kind of a racialized identity in this country of these groups that kind of brings them together. So the terms like, these umbrella terms like Hispanic and Latino, which as we talked last time, are really American terms that come out of the American experience, basically reflect more and more a reality, a political reality. So that one of the challenges in looking at Latino politics is that you have to be able to chew gum and walk at the same time, in the sense of being able to understand this abstraction of Latino, Hispanic as a political kind of concept, but also looking at the specific Latino subgroups as well and their reality. So there's kind of a generalization that is real, and also the need to kind of break that down, disaggregate that, and look at the realities of Mexican Americans, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans. For example, Mexican Americans and Mexicans. They simply can't talk about Mexicans in general, but there's a strong immigrant Mexican population, as well as a longstanding Mexican American population, many of which have been here longer than so-called white Americans.
Certainly longer than my relatives on both sides.
So those differences are important to take into account as well. So, you know, it's not either or. And what's been happening is more and more we're seeing this kind of pan-Latino, this pan-ethnic consciousness growing. You find it, for example, by the increasing number of Hispanic, Latino organizations that use these umbrella terms more and more. So while there were a lot in New York, there were a lot of Puerto Rican organizations. Now you begin to have
your organization,
right, who went from being Puerto Rican to using broader terms like Hispanic and Latino more and more.
Sure.
So that's one indication that there's something going on in terms of that idea of Latino Hispanic community in a broader sense.
Looking at Latino political power and representation and the Latino vote, every 4 years, it seems, we read and hear about the growing pivotal impact of Latinos, the Latino wave, the awakened electoral giant, but it doesn't seem to come to pass. In 2008, clearly there was some, you know, you could look at the data and look at North Carolina, you could look at Nevada, you could look at certain states where Latinos seem to have made a difference. Is that true? And what does it look like? What does the terrain look like in 2012?
Well, you know, the Latino vote becomes important depending on how tight the race is going to be. So it's not something that you can basically say it's going to be significant in terms of its impact in every election. Unfortunately, what happens is within the Latino community, of course, there's a lot of hype of the vote, and you know, everybody, of course, wants to. And this happens not just with Latinos, it happens with veterans, with blacks, with everybody's vote. The gay vote is the most important, is going to be the one that's going to swing the election. You get a lot of that stuff going on. The Latino vote becomes important, again, and this clearly is a classic case where, according to the polls, this is going to be a super tight race for president. So the Latino vote, all of a sudden, even if it's a small percentage of a particular state, could basically make the difference. But again, you won't be able to tell until after the election's over.
Right.
It's hard to project, but clearly that's something that's been interesting from the point of view that Latinos have concentrated in states that have been primarily, blue states.
Non-battleground states.
New York and California,
and
for example.
Texas.
And then you have Texas. But it's also been interesting in that places like the South have seen the growth in the Latino population. And, you know, you may have a population where the voters in, let's say, North Carolina or Virginia, maybe 5% are Latino. But that 5% could be influential depending on how tight the race is going to be. Florida has been really, really interesting because there's been a real interesting dynamic with the influx of many Puerto Ricans and other Latinos that have kind of countered the kind of pro-Republican Cuban vote. And that's kind of put Florida more in place. So today, every day, there's a poll that talks about how the balance between Romney and Obama in Florida is kind of like 1 point this way, 1 point that way. And a lot of that has to do, I think, with the dynamics in terms of the demographic changes in the Latino community in Florida. That has a lot to do with what's happening down there. So, you know, that's what's one aspect of it. The other aspect, when you look at the significance of the Latino vote or how significant it's going to be, is the issue of turnout.
Crucial.
We don't know. We don't know. There are estimates ranging anywhere from that the Latino vote will be maybe like from 8 million to perhaps 12 million. We don't know what the turnout's going to be. And one of the problems is that, you know, you have these polls, but to be honest, I think if people are beginning to question the reliability of a lot of the polling that's going on. There's this polling madness that's going on. And,
I'm one of the mad pollsters.
It's driving people crazy.
Right.
So we don't know the polls in terms of gauging the amount of the degree of Latino participation. It's not that clear that the polls are going to be helpful. And also the way we collect information on voters in this country is, you know, largely state-based. State by state,
sure.
And different states have different ways of doing that. And there's always a controversy in terms of trying to figure out how many people actually turned out to vote, how many were registered. I mean, so we really won't have a really good sense of what's going on until afterwards. The Census Bureau does a survey, but that's subjective. It's kind of like they ask you, did you vote? You know, are you registered to vote? A lot of people feel like, oh, gee, I better say I did, even though I didn't.
It's socially acceptable.
So, you know, I think
it
overstates, you know.
It certainly overstates. The census data shows like 11 points more than people actually voted.
So we don't really have a good sense of that. But one of the things that's been interesting, clearly Latino turnout rates are much lower than that of whites or blacks. We're talking about maybe 50% of Latino voters, people who are eligible to vote, say that they actually voted, say, in the last election.
Also, they tend to register less, and then they tend to turn out even if registered less.
And that's the case.
What
and then
is
when
it?
we talk about eligible, well, the thing is, when you talk about eligible voters, the problem that Latinos have is, even though they really should be making up 15% of the electorate, wind up making up maybe 7-8%.
Right.
But that's just in terms of just the turnout of those eligible. But then the eligibility problem is a major one. Citizenship. A lot of people are just not citizens. It's a younger population. And then, for example, you have over like close to 4 million Latinos who live that are U.S. citizens, that live in the U.S. territories, like in Puerto Rico, that are not eligible to vote for president or the Congress. So you have a bunch of Latinos, mostly Puerto Ricans, who are U.S. citizens they're U.S. citizens, but they can't even participate in the process directly. So you have that issue of eligibility, which is a major problem in the Latino community. In terms of, I mean, there are people have been trying to get, like the movement in the District of Columbia, to try to get. District of Columbia residents can now vote for president, but they can't vote for congressional representatives.
Right.
That's part of a movement that some people are trying to press in the courts in terms of Puerto Rico as well. So those are some real challenges when you talk about the Latino vote and its impact that really limit the size of the community. The only thing that makes the Latino vote a viable force is just the sheer size of the community. We're talking about, if you include Puerto Rico, you're talking about 56 million people in the United States are Latino background. And just that sheer size, even though there's a lower rate of participation, it's still a lot of people. We're talking about like 8 to maybe 12 million Latino voters.
Okay, let's turn to the presidential campaign, Obama versus Romney. It seems that Latinos are disappointed in Obama for a number of reasons. You know, the deportation president, the failure to have comprehensive immigration reform, etc. But it's almost as if the Republican Party has developed a strategy to alienate Latinos. In a sense, Romney's worst enemy with Latinos is himself. He vetoed the DREAM Act. He praised Arizona's restrictive immigration law. When Rick Perry said that he wanted in-state tuition for the children of undocumented workers, he attacked them. Support for self-deportation. So there are a whole series of things where Romney personally in the Republican Party almost is intentionally driving away the Latino vote.
Well, to me, the pivotal point at which you really saw that was when Marco Rubio, a rising star in the Republican Party, a Cuban American from Florida, senator, had this idea of developing what I call a DREAM Act Light version. This is before the president came out with the delayed
we'll talk about that.
Policy. And what happened was that Romney had an opportunity there to basically outshine the president in terms of being responsive to Latinos, and that is coming up with a kind of modified version of the DREAM Act coming from the Republican Party. Basically, just dropped it, didn't do anything with it. The president comes in, Obama, and all of a sudden comes out with this delay of deportation, this 2-year delay program, and kind of like was able to basically put Romney really on the defensive on this issue. So I think that was a pivotal point at which Romney could have turned things around in terms of getting the kind of support he wanted to get from the Latino community. Not a majority. He was talking about getting maybe 38%, 40%.
Yeah, but it seems
and they just blew it. And that was a good opportunity to do it, and just didn't do it. And, it's the kind of thing that winds up alienating, as you said, the Latino voters for the most part.
So let's say this 35, 38, 40% that some Republican strategists are talking as if they get that vote out of Latinos, they've got a lock on the election. If he's polling at 21%, he's got half of that. Is it too late for Romney to pivot? Is there anything Romney can do?
No. I think it's
too late.
I think it's too late. I think what happened once he, I think, selected Ryan as his running mate, that was a sign to me that the focus was no longer trying to reach out to groups like Latinos, but it was really to basically say, look, my strategy now is I got to maximize the base, the white voters, and that's really been, I think, the strategy. I mean, they've continued to do some minimal things in terms of reaching out to the Latino community, but I think basically the strategy is, look, we have to make sure that we get as many white male voters to come on board. We have to basically hope that all this voter suppression legislation
Let's talk about
is going to have an impact and minimize the Black Latino vote. And I think that's really been the real strategy. So you wonder if, for example, if whatever kind of advertising by the Romney campaign to Latinos is really more cover, more than an actual attempt to really reach out to this community.
Let's talk about these voter ID laws and the fraud versus suppression argument. Talk about that.
Well, one of the things that's to me been amazing has been the kind of really crass political agenda that the Republicans have shown in developing these photo ID kind of citizenship requirements for voting. These attempts to basically make it more difficult for people to vote, and particular groups of people, seniors, poor people, Latinos, people who are have a high percentage of folks that are not citizens, blacks clearly. And those
Democratic voters
that wind up all of a sudden being Democratic voters, and so clearly you have this legislative leader in Pennsylvania who said it outright. He said, "Look, we got voter ID." He said, "Check. Now it'll be easy. Now, well, it'll help Romney get elected." He basically just said it publicly. So
they're doing it in front of the curtain. It's not even that it's surreptitious. It's right out there.
And it's also the kind of thing where they're basically insulting blacks, Latinos through that as well. Not just simply, it's not simply a question of Romney's position on immigration or whatever. This also is a slap in the face to the community at a point where in this country we really should be talking about expanding people's right to vote, making it easier for people to vote. All of a sudden there's this movement to do the reverse, and it just makes absolutely no
You talked about a slap in the face, but are Latinos going to react to the slap in the face by turning out?
That's been the interesting part of this, that there's been this kind of pushback to this voter suppression, these voter suppression measures. that have been kind of interesting, because now all of a sudden the people are using that as a way to mobilize voters in these communities. Resources are going to kind of counter these things. There's a real waste of time in that now a lot of groups have to go and advocate around in terms of the courts around to try to stop these things. But
and they've been successful in the main.
And they've been successful in it, but it's been something that's been, people have been trying to turn these lemons into lemonade in terms of creating a feeling among Latinos and blacks and seniors like, look, don't let these guys kind of get the best of you here. You got to come out and turn out now, especially to show that you're not going to be intimidated and that you're not going to have this right taken away from you. So we don't know. We don't know what impact it's actually going to have.
It could have a counterproductive effect, you're saying.
It's hard to tell.
Right.
You know, right now, the strategy is to suppress voting among certain groups, but it may wind up not having that effect, because it also, you know, you have people working and reacting to it and trying to overcome those you know, those negative effects of these laws. And we'll see what happens. I mean, you said the courts have been challenging them. And then politically, it also has raised the issue of the importance of it. As you know, we're talking about a presidential election at the national level, that it shows the importance of also getting involved in terms of this politics at the state level
and the local
legislature,
level. Yep.
the local level. So it may have those kind of beneficial effects in terms of the kind of mobilization of Latinos and other, you know, basically poor people, working people. We'll see. We'll see.
You know, being the polling person that I am, looking at the 9 battleground state polls, Obama's leading Romney 65-23, almost the same as the national numbers. And in fact, they could really cast decisive ballots in Colorado, Florida, Nevada, North Carolina, and Virginia. So this could be the year that the Latino wave washes over the election.
Well, you know, that's the other thing.
But you got to get them out.
When we look at the national polls, the fact is that these elections, because of the electoral college mechanism that we use to elect presidents, it's really at the state level. It's a state-by-state kind of process. And here, that's what we're gonna see. What's going to happen. Florida is a great example of where it's not clear. You know, one day you hear one poll where Romney's ahead, the next day it's you know, Obama.
And it's always 1 or 2 points. It's always dead within the margin of error.
And the Latino community has been increasingly, well, not increasingly, but the Latino community now has clearly been in Florida, for example, in support of Obama in a majority. But that gap is changing as well. So it's a very dynamic kind of process. And one of the things about this election, which is interesting, is that it's hard to use examples from past elections to talk about what's going to happen in this one, because what happened in 2007, 2008 in terms of the economy, the role of, you know, technology, social media, there's so many things now
and the fact that you had an historic candidate who was an African-American running.
And you have the
woman,
Citizens United.
Right.
They're all, the amount of money that's going at this thing is unbelievable. So this, I don't know, this election, it seems in many ways very unique. So it's hard to kind of call it from past experiences. And, you know, you see all these commentators in the news making references, oh, this is like the 2004 election, 19. And that, I'm not sure if that's valid. It's going to be interesting. It's also going to be a major challenge in terms of polls. How accurate are these polls? Because even that process has been really challenging. There are less people who want to participate in all this polling and marketing research. The fact that now, you know, you have all these cell phones as opposed to landline phones. You don't know what effect that's having in terms of the accuracy of these polls down the road in terms of the actual election. So it's going to be really interesting to look at the polls and the actual election results and to compare the two. And see,
right, and particularly people have to recognize that polls aren't predictions. They're snapshots in time.
Yeah.
So in Florida today, it's snapshot 1, tomorrow it's snapshot 2. The last time you were here, we talked a little bit about the lack of Latino leadership in a number of sectors, politically, in the churches, in businesses, et cetera. In the 6 months since our conversation, we had 2 conventions where we have 2 of the rising stars, Rubio in the Republicans and Julian Castro in the Democrats. Is there an emerging political class leadership with governors like Martinez and Sandoval?
Well, there really isn't. That's one of the things that's been really interesting in Latino cases at the national level. There really haven't been any really strong emerging national leaders.
None.
A lot of the people the people you refer to are local leaders. Yep. For example, in the Democratic Party, which has the most loyalty from Latinos, sure. I always raise the issue of it's not clear what the cost of loyalty has been, because many times the Democratic Party has taken the Latino vote for granted, feeling, look,
you've written extensively about
we have these guys in our pockets. We don't really have to do. So the Democratic Party hasn't really developed any strong Latino leaders, hasn't really cultivated those leaders.
Because they're captives.
And the Republican Party, on the other hand, has been doing much more these days in terms of cultivating Latino Republican candidates. The big question is going to be when you look at Ted Cruz in Texas, you look at Rubio, you look at Luis Fortuño, the governor of Puerto Rico. Yep. You look at these guys as rising Latino stars. The big test is going to be after November. What role will these guys be playing within the Republican Party? Was it simply an electoral convenience to talk about these as Latino rising stars? So the real test is after this election, no matter what happens, whether it's Romney or Obama who wins, will these guys be playing a significant role in the leadership of the Republican Party or not? And that's going to be really a real test. I'm also interested in looking at the role of Latino conservatives after this election. The Republican Party has put resources in developing kind of a more conservative infrastructure. There are various organizations that have been kind of come up, and I'm wondering the viability of those past November. Again, were these simply little props that were created because of the election, or is there the basis for a growing conservative movement within the Latino community? That's another question that kind of comes up after November. We're going to have to wait and see how that develops.
You're going to have to join me to talk about that.
Well, I mean, to me, this is really fascinating stuff.
I got two quickies. You got 15 seconds each. Mitt Romney calls you up. He saw the show. He loved you. What do you tell him?
Well, at this point, tell him just good luck, and there's not much else you could do. You've done all the damage in terms of the Latino vote that you can do, and
that's it.
We'll see what happens.
What about Obama?
Well, Obama basically, I hope he got enough anxiety attacks from Latino criticism at a point where I know he was counting on strong Latino support to understand that if he gets reelected, he's got to take the Latino community much more seriously.
And their issues.
And their issues much more.
My thanks to my friend Angelo Falcón, president of the National Institute of Latino Policy, for joining us this week. Join us next week for more Decision 2012 here on CUNY TV. Excellent. Excellent. You are the best. Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.